เข้าสู่ The Great Debate ของวันนี้กับหัวข้อท้ายสุดค่ะเรามาต้อนรับฝ่ายเสนอก่อนนะคะวันนี้ต้อนรับฝ่ายเสนอคนแรกคุณเอมิตาสิริเดชชัยค่ะเชิญค่ะฝ่ายเสนอคนที่2ค่ะคุณโอรสรักกสิกรค่ะและตามด้วยฝ่ายเสนอนะคะท่านที่3ต้อนรับพรปวีม้วนรีดค่ะฝ่ายเสนอมี2สาว1หนุ่มวันนี้ฝ่ายค้านต้องเบิ้ล1รอบเพราะว่ามากันแค่2คนนะคะฝ่ายค้านท่านแรกต้อนรับสกลพัฒน์เอี่ยมเสมอและแน่นอนนะคะระดับชิงแชมป์โลกเข็มขัดรุ่นเฮฟวี่เวทวันนี้ต้องใช้คำนี้เลยเพชรกิจชเอกชัยค่ะนามสกุลก็ใช่แล้วนะใช่เหมือนนักมวยแล้วนะและต้อนรับผู้จัดการทีมวันนี้ค่ะพิธานิรุตติจารุไพศาลกิจค่ะวันนี้โค้ชพาตามาเหมือนเดิมนะคะสวัสดีทั้งโค้ชด้วยนะคะเดี๋ยวช่วงนี้ให้น้องทามดำเนินการเลยค่ะก่อนที่จะเข้าสู่การโต้วาทีในวันนี้นะคะอยากจะให้น้องทามอธิบายให้ทุกคนเข้าใจว่าการโต้วาทีระดับประเทศและโลกเป็นยังไงต่างกันยังไงบ้างเชิญน้องทามค่ะ
นะครับสวัสดีทุกท่านนะครับผมนายนิรุตติจารุไพศาลกิจหรือไทม์นะครับเป็นผู้จัดการทีมโต้สาระวาทีภาษาอังกฤษทีมชาติไทยหรือ Thailand National Debate Team ครับทีมนี้เป็นการรวมตัวของนักเรียนมัธยมจากทั่วประเทศทั้งโรงเรียนรัฐบาลเอกชนและนานาชาติที่ผ่านการคัดเลือกอย่างเข้มข้นเพื่อเป็นตัวแทนประเทศไทยในการแข่งขัน World School Debating Championship ซึ่งถือได้ว่าเป็นเวทีระดับโลกเทียบได้ว่าเป็นโอลิมปิกของวงการโต้วาทีครับก่อนจะเริ่มผมขออธิบายกติกาสั้นๆนะครับ 1. ผู้พูดแต่ละคนจะมีเวลา8นาทีโดยพูดสลับกันระหว่างฝ่ายเสนอและฝ่ายค้านครับ 2. ระหว่างการพูดคู่แข่งสามารถยืนขึ้นและกล่าวคำว่า point of information point information หรือ POI เพื่อขอถามคำถามสั้นๆได้ครับ 3. ผู้พูดสามารถเลือกที่จะรับหรือปฏิเสธคำถามเหล่านี้ได้นะครับแต่โดยทั่วไปแล้วเราจะเชียร์ให้รับประมาณ 1-2 คำถามเพราะมีผลต่อคะแนนครับแล้วก็ผมขอเสริมนิดนึงนะครับเหมือนที่พี่โอ๊ตได้เกริ่นให้แล้วนะครับว่าวันนี้เรามีฝ่ายค้านเพียง2คนเพราะฉะนั้นจะมีการพูดซ้ำเพื่อที่เราจะได้3บทพูดในทั้ง2ครั้งนะครับวันนี้น้องๆจะมาจำลองการโต้วาทีหรือ exhibition debate ในหัวข้อ This House as Thailand would prioritize collaboration with ASEAN environmental effort over global effort กล่าวคือในฐานะของประเทศไทยเนี่ยเราจะให้ความสำคัญในการร่วมมือกับอาเซียนมากกว่าการร่วมมือระดับโลกนะครับและเพื่อไม่ให้เป็นการเสียเวลาขอเสียงตบมือให้กับนักโต้วาทีทั้ง5คนครับ Without further ado I would like to invite the first proposition to open today's debate here
Climate change has been a global issue since the 70s. It took 2 decades since then for real action like the Montreal Protocol or the Tokyo Protocol to actually happen. And now the future is unpredictable with the tendency of the United States trying to leave the Paris Agreement. Developing nations like Thailand can no longer wait, and it is time that we take action now. Never prouder to propose. 2 things in my speech. Firstly, I'll be giving you some points of framing, and then I'll be giving 2 arguments then. So first point of framing, what is the problem that is being discussed in today's debate? So we're discussing environmental policy and climate change, right? Which is fundamentally a global issue, but its effects vary region to region. For example, the effects that ASEAN face and the effect that developed nations face are different, right? So this issue has been globally acknowledged since the 70s, but till now not enough action has been made. And as I have stated before, action is being taken very slowly. The main reason for this is that each nation have different interests. Therefore, it is very hard for them to actually agree on one solution and take it into action, right? And climate change is close to irreversible right now. Moreover, it is self-amplifying, which means that it is the problem exacerbates itself. Therefore, the longer we wait, the worse
Point.
it is for Thailand and other developing nations like ASEAN. Therefore, we must take action now. Second point of framing then, what is the solution that we propose on side government? So we think that we as Thailand would prioritize collaboration with ASEAN over global efforts. This looks like shifting focus to build a regional supply chain that operates under ASEAN standards rather than relying on trade that operates under EU or UN regulations, right? We also want to cooperate with ASEAN in solving regional problems like agriculture, transboundary pollution, and hazing, flooding, etc. We want to also focus on building green energy, like cross-border green energy projects, right? For example, we have already made some progress with an ASEAN power project that has begun about 2 decades ago. So the point of framing that what is the burden on our side? The burden on our side is that we must prove that by collaborating with ASEAN, we are achieving more impacts that is in the interest of Thailand rather than cooperating with the rest of the world. So 2 arguments then. First argument, regional cooperation yields more relevant and implementable policies, right? As stated before, part of the reason why enough progress hasn't been made is that climate change has it's because different nations have different contexts and problem and interests. Therefore, we cannot use a one-size-fits-all solution to solve this problem. ASEAN has specific regional issues. Yes?
ASEAN is a collective of 10 countries with many different interests and political systems. How are you sure that they're going to be able to collaborate?
I'd say that the difference between the 10 nations in ASEAN is less than the difference between ASEAN in the first world country like the United States, for example, because at least most countries in ASEAN, maybe except Singapore or other countries, are at least in the developing stage, right? So ASEAN has specific regional issues like transboundary pollution and flooding, and it makes more sense that we Southeast Asian nations work together to actually tackle it instead of making it waiting for our first world nation to chip in and make effort in solving our problem, right? So, and we have some real-world tangible solutions that we have seen that has manifested before in the real world, right? For example, I have stated that ASEAN is currently working on an agreement that is trying to solve transboundary pollution from agricultural hazing, right? Because all nations in ASEAN is mostly focused on agriculture. We have also we have also invested in a cross-border green energy project since 1999. And these projects have made a lot of positive impacts for Thailand. Therefore, I think it is in the interest of Thailand to actually cooperate with ASEAN. The impact here is that we get more suitable solutions that actually solve real-world problems in ASEAN, right? Second argument then, we say that ASEAN collaboration would result in increased political influence for Thailand, and it would make negotiating issues with the world much easier, right? So firstly here, it would be easier for Thailand to bargain and negotiate with ASEAN because the nations, as I responded to your POI, the nations in ASEAN are on much more similar terms. The nations in ASEAN have much more equal bargaining power. Therefore, it will be easier for Thailand to actually negotiate with these nations than say negotiate with Trump and his tariffs, for example. Second layer, when ASEAN join forces, it is much easier for us to negotiate with first world countries as a bloc because now we have more bargaining power, right? ASEAN, if we join economies together, ASEAN has one of the top 10 biggest economies in the world. It is much stronger if we work together. So what we achieve here is that we can get fairer deals that is more suitable for Thailand. I think it is not fair that developed countries in the EU or other first world Western countries can implement unfair regulations on Thailand. For example, these countries, because they are already developed, the goal now is to try cut emission, but they have already capitalized off of using emissions for centuries. But so of course it is in their interest to reduce uses of carbon energy, but it is not in ASEAN's interest to reduce use of carbon energy because it is cheaper and we are still developing, right? So to sum up my speech, by collaborating with ASEAN, we would get fairer deals with other nations, and we get more solutions that are more suitable to the problems that we are facing regionally. So therefore, never prouder to propose. Thank you.
I thank the first proposition for the speech. Next, I would like to invite the first opposition to open up case. Here.
The entirety of ASEAN's total emission is 4 to 5% of the global emission. This means that even if proposition is able to prove that it is efficient to work within the ASEAN to solve climate issue, the real impact that manifests into the world are very little and are unable to change universal issue of climate change, like the temperature that is continuing to rise or the sea level that floods Bangkok in 50 to 100 years in the future. That is a problem that they have to fight and they are unable to solve under their side of the house. I'll forward two arguments then. First, on why ASEAN cooperative won't be efficient in solving any issue, but second of all, on why the global efforts is actually a more tangible outcome for Thailand then. Before that, three pieces of framing then. First, on what's the context of Thailand right now and its interest then. First, I think it has a very strong diplomatic flexibilities because when you look at issues like Trump tariff, Thailand is only one of the few countries in ASEAN to diplomatically get out of the crisis, or even with issue with China, Thailand has a very strategic and cooperative economy in a diplomatic sphere and a global narrative that it have the ability to have negotiation and a narrative that they can control. What is the interest of Thailand then? Two things. One, I think they want to secure things like technological and then financial funds to adopt climate change issue and innovation in their own spheres and then their own economy then. Second of all, it looks like keeping diplomatic leverage between big powers also, between things like the US, China, or the EU themselves. Second piece of framing then, obviously global efforts look like. Four things. One, it looks like things like the Paris Agreement itself or the COP summits where they provide financial and technological transfer to things like climate funds. Or two, things like World Bank initiative where they provide data or transparency in terms of accountability. Thirdly, then, it looks like things like bilateral agreement, for example, the Thailand and Japan cooperation to reduce carbon emission or with the EU then. But the fourth thing here to note is that there is an active incentive from global superpowers to checks and balance against each other because there is an active demand to control the global narrative and the one being more efficient to solve the climate issue themselves then. Third piece of framing then on what is symmetric on both sides of the house, we tell you that things like financial or technological transfer within the ASEAN will be symmetric because how the regional bloc is already intended and tightly integrated economically, but the note here that is vastly different from any other issue outside of the economy because they work on the idea of non-interference. When you look at issues like environmental issue or like the wars and things like conflict like that, ASEAN agreements are insanely non-binding and are unable to interfere or like intervene within each other's ability to kind of govern and then have these policies pushed out individually within the members' nation then. This means that I think the bloc itself is, in a way, not highly integrated outside of the economic issue that exists then. I'll forward the first argument then on why ASEAN cooperative won't be efficient. Note here that this is a prerequisite to proposition argument insofar that they are unable to work as a bloc. If this argument works, it fails for their case and their side of the house then. Three things to note. One, the context of Asian country right now is that middle to lower income nations like Laos, Myanmar, or Cambodia are still unable to structurally transition into green energy because they need to rely on cheap coal or resource extraction for its growth. Meaning, structurally, they are financially limited from the ability to actually transition or get or follows regulation in a way that Thailand want to initiate it or want to prioritize these kind of funding towards them then. Second of all, I think there's very limited political capitals towards environmental issue within the ASEAN themselves because there are much more urgent issue that voters among the individual nation cares more about, whether it's structural inequality or systematic poverty cycle that exists or the health infrastructure in a lot of ASEAN nations which are already unsolved right now. This means that other priorities that ASEAN nations already take priorities in and they are able to put things like political capital into these agreements then. The last thing under this is that we want to point out to an insane amount of political instability in the region itself, right? This looks like the ongoing civil war in Myanmar and the current military junta and its regimes, or the recent Thai-Cambodia border conflicts that sparks an ongoing war right now, or the authoritarian government of many states, or the populist regime of Philippines right now that control the media narrative. The implication here is that it's unclear that if these nations were to cooperate, they are able to follow the regulation that is being pushed out in terms of these environmental agreement and environmental issues then. Two impacts I want to highlight then. One, it's unclear why other nations will help, but second of all, this means that it's also wasteful for Thailand resources to spend helping these countries because in Thailand's interest, it does in no way gain any kind of returns within the ASEAN cooperative and in these blocks then. The weighing here is also that I already said that even if they're able to prove that this is efficient, the impact on tangible and universal climate issue is still unsolved because 4 to 5% of carbon emission in her globally are very ineffective of the entire narrative and how it actually changes the global issue of things like climate change then. To my second argument on why the global effort is in a way more tangible for Thailand to see the impact on the ground then. 4 things to note. One, I think there's a very high amount of funding and technological advancement that will spill over into Thailand when you look at this issue, right? Because these kind of fundings exist, for example, over $1 billion of funding for developing countries to actually resolve and then make innovation and adopt innovation about these kind of climate issues then. But second of all, I think large powers already have active incentive to check the balance on each other, meaning there's real action and punishment for not applying and not kind of doing the regulation that is imposed as opposed to things like the ASEAN countries where those most agreements are non-binding in the first place. I'll take a point, yes.
As a developing country, why would those developed nations care about such a small country on our side?
I think in a way it still works and a more tangible outcome than the insanely unstable kind of block of ASEAN itself when there's literally no impact that actually manifests within the kind of ASEAN area in the first place. It's unclear why you also get these kind of change because I think at least under our side of the house, there is the ability for Thailand to actually at least speak up and advocate about these issues that are localized and in a way also effective. But third thing here is also things like international pressure and recognition itself also push the government to meet target even if when the domestic accountability is in a way might be weak. Right. The fourth thing then is that on the idea of what the actor will be, I think it's also the likely actor that countries and nations like China will also come in and help things like innovation and then these kind of environment issues then. Why then is this a good thing and why then even China has a good natural incentive to do environmental issues then? For 3 reasons. One, I think China themselves are on the edge of climate impact. Things like their own agricultural system are failing because of these climate issues that is persistent in the status quo. But second of all, I think China themselves want to control the global narrative of environmental issue. For example, the green tech that they're already leading in terms of things like solar cells or like these kind of renewable energy industry because they can't compete with these kind of the West in other industries that exist. This means that there are also active checks and balance and within the regional actor themselves, China are also the local actor which also have the active incentive to localize the problem into ASEAN and then East ASEAN that already exists for these kind of problem. I think for all of these reasons, opposition.
I thank the first opposition for the speech. Next, I would like to invite the second propositions to continue Prop's case. Here.
few points of rebuttals before I move on to my two extension arguments on how it is more cost effective and efficient for Thailand to opt into Asian efforts instead of global efforts, and how it builds a better long-term adaptation for Thailand as a whole. Okay, a few points of rebuttals then. First point, I would like to point out how side opposition has been neglecting the fact that Thailand doesn't actually have the capability or the bargaining power to actually bargain in these global efforts or agreements. They have completely ignored that yes, we agree that climate change is a big global issue, but it is not true that climate change Thailand faces the same global climate problems as the world. What we mean by this is that in Asian countries and Thailand, in Southeast Asian countries, we face the same environmental issues, for example, flooding or pollution that happens in Southeast Asia and is not necessarily a global problem. So we don't see how these faraway developed countries would actually even care about these problems that Thailand are facing in the status quo, and they have completely neglected that fact that Thailand does not have the power to bargain in these agreements, and that these common problems are climate issues that Thailand and Asian countries share is a problem that can only be solved if we focus on the ASEAN climate efforts. Okay, second point of rebuttal then is it, okay.
What exactly does Thailand need from other countries in order to continue our environmental efforts?
Can you clarify what do you mean by other countries?
What exactly do we want other countries to do with us to continue the global efforts?
We do need resources. We need the power to actually make to actually move a policy or a climate policy to an environmental policy to actually happen, right? Without the resource or power from a policy or agreement from other nations, we without that coordination, we can't effectively solve a climate problem alone, obviously. But the reason it is better for us to prioritize on ASEAN climate efforts instead of global is because it focuses more directly on the problems we are actually facing directly without having to negotiate to the agreements, the global agreements that doesn't directly benefit us as a country or with our current state of environmental state. Second point of rebuttal then on how side opposition has been going on about how Asian countries are in poverty and they can't actually help Thailand, or they're incapable of actually enacting these policies. We say that this is completely untrue. It is a line of assertion that they did not have any mechanism through it that can actually prove that Asian is incapable. And my first speaker has already told you on how Asian efforts as a whole is capable, and they are they've enacted many policies and climate policies that actually helped with pollution. For example, the Transboundary Pollution Agreement, as my first speaker already said. So we do not see what they mean by by Thailand will be quote unquote wasting their money on these Asian efforts when we see that these efforts are actually the efforts that best benefit Thailand itself. Okay, moving on to my arguments then. Firstly is why it is more cost effective and way more efficient for Thailand to opt into Asian efforts instead of global ones. So as my first speaker already framed, with global agreements and global efforts, it involves many countries with competing interests, and this this requires endless talks and weekend commitments. So we can't act and as I already said that we don't have that much of a bargaining power as a small country as Thailand. So by contributing to Asian efforts instead of global ones, we get a obviously much faster coordination and less negotiation time, which solves problems way faster, which is also important, as opposition agreed that climate change is a problem that is very urgent and we have to solve it. Especially the problems we face in like Southeast Asian countries, specifically within itself, is like the ones that we can solve now without having to wait for these global agreements to be made in the first place. Secondly is ASEAN countries have like shared costs and resources. For example, they have the same they're in the same like economy status, and they kind of have the same like econ and like environmental structure, have the same problems, share the same issues, and like share the same resources. Therefore, it is much easier for them to like pass down these policies that are beneficial for ASEAN countries as a whole. Second is like policy alignment, right? So as I already said that they have like similar econ and vote structure, it is much easier to agree on like regulation standards and it than negotiating with a faraway developed nation. And my second point then is that like it builds a better long-term adaptation.
Point.
So, sure.
Why is it that we have to develop only with first world countries and not countries like China? Why is it that we only have to like negotiate with first world countries? Why not just negotiate with China too?
We see that, okay, because it's a global effort. We do have to negotiate with both first world countries and China, obviously, but that is still a global effort. We see that it still like makes the process much slower by having to negotiate with those agreements. Okay, moving on to my next point on how it builds a better long-term adaptation for Thailand. We see that it like by focusing directly on these like direct policies and issues that ASEAN countries are actually facing. It strengthens the system of the adaptation system and independency of these Southeast Asian countries and improves and by improving and like sharing the best practice within these Southeast Asian countries and protects and protects the likelihood of these like policies actually working for these countries. And for example, like policies on climate resilient agriculture, which is what Southeast Asian focus is about, and it also builds a stronger foundation that would be created by like having more independency as like a Southeast Asian ASEAN as a whole, but also this put Thailand in a position that is stronger and also that could make them later meaningfully contribute further into global efforts in the future if they have to. Because now that we simply are too weak and do not have our own power to actually like, for us to opt into those global agreements and have it benefit us like the most it should. So, so in the status quo, if we opt more into the global efforts, Thailand will remain more vulnerable and the capacity to engage with global efforts is weak. So by opting into ASEAN environmental efforts, we fixed our problems to the core and we get things done faster. So I've never been prouder to propose.
I thank the second prop for the speech. Next, I would like to invite the second oppositions to continue Op's case. Here.
For some reason, government believes that just because something is easy, that should be our one and only option, that should be what we sink ourselves into. We tell you that sure, maybe negotiating with ASEAN might be the easiest thing we could do in this debate, but that might not be the most effective. Why? Because if you listen to what actually side governments want to do in terms of solving the environment, they give us two things they want to do. One, changing policies, and two, just creating a supply chain. Let me deal with the second one first. Very simply, I don't think there is a way that you are going to be able to establish a fully green supply chain just from ASEAN countries. I don't think there is enough technological know-how existing in ASEAN, nor is that incentive enough to develop one, and nor is there and nor is that like just an existing infrastructure to carry that out anyways. But I'll also deal with the policy thing later in my speech. First question here is that what do the two worlds actually look like? Because on side proposition, basically what they have to defend is a world where the transitioning into like green tech is predominantly done with ASEAN. This probably means that they have to defend a world where you have to find and source like green tech from ASEAN, collaborate with them by selling these like goods into the ASEAN market rather than ones which are more Western centric. What is it exactly that we're defending as an opposition? We are telling you that the global effort means that we are choosing to find supply chain or find partners that could be outside of ASEAN. They could look like China, they could look like Western countries. We tell you that this already has been a thing that we've been doing for the past 30 years, and this is probably going to be continuing. The next thing here is that it looks at what are actually the goals and like the incentives of the countries in this debate then. Because on their side of the house, the only mechanism they tell us as to why ASEAN is very likely to be able to care about like environment is because like they are affected by it. 2-point responses then, because firstly we tell you that most parts of ASEAN lives under an authoritarian regime. This regime basically never really cares about what the people think, and literally the only thing they care about is their own profit, is their own well-being. We tell you that these people, especially the privileged people, are the ones who are gonna be the least prone for like environmental impact. They can probably buy themselves a house somewhere else to be able to escape from it. The common people are the one who is suffering, and they're the people with no voice. This means that in most of these states, the only thing they care about is probably going to be environment, like economical development, rather than like these and like developing new environmental things. But also, second thing is that we also tell you that ASEAN is not something that's binding. ASEAN has never done something that's actually it's a long-term collaborative effort so far. And we tell you that the reason for that is that there are structural differences in the economy of ASEAN. Don't let them run away by telling you that every single country in ASEAN is so similar, it's so easy to collaborate with one another. Because we tell you, if you look around ASEAN, you see many different types of industry, like unique to a country. We see that Thailand has a very, very big auto industry, but I don't think Laos and Cambodia has it. We see that many other countries do prioritize in cheaper goods like textile or whatever more than other countries. So we tell them that because the economic structure are not similar and are not the same, and that's the mechanism they gave as to why the global effort doesn't work, we see that maybe sure that ASEAN has some similarities, but because the delta is very, very small, we tell you that there probably isn't a lot more in terms of clarity being done. But third thing here is that just on the point of capacity, because we already told you in first that because most of Western countries and most Western countries, even China, has been the one who's pioneering green tech, which is something that we need to adopt in order to further our economy. These will probably look like technology, like making new solar cells, or making new factories to run cleaner, or maybe just neglecting coal, like taking away coal in the very first place. So we tell you that because these first world countries are already doing this technology, we can probably just buy it. Sure, we might get some unfavorable deals, but it's probably going to be a lot cheaper than collaborating and building everything up from scratch. So I think in the long term, even if we assume their best case, we tell you that it's a lot easier for us to get these sorts of technology. Before I move on to my second question, sure.
Okay, so I don't think China has our interest in mind either. China wants to debt trap developing countries. China wants to politically influence countries in ASEAN. Therefore, with the world being under China or the West, we don't really have an option left here.
For three reasons, Thailand will not go under the debt trap. One, we are a country with lots of governmental assets we can sell away and lots of money in a federal bank. Secondly, we tell you Thailand in the past have been very flexible with like diplomatic negotiations, like how we were able to basically make China become our ally after we recognize the existence. And also thirdly, we also tell you that a Thai government is very maneuverable in terms of finding money from out of thin air. We look at how we're able to just find money to like subsidize our trade over the past regime. We tell you there's money for us, and we are not like Sri Lanka where we're literally broken, like Cambodia where we don't have any other options. We tell you that we can exist like with China as like a partner like Russia to be able to like collaborate with them. But also we tell you the way that we are gonna collaborate with China is not just to make them come and like just like seal away all our ports. This probably look more like technology sharing, or maybe just make them open up new factories in Thailand where Thai workers can go and just gain knowledge from them. Second question here is that who who actually makes like the environment better for Thailand. And we tell you that this is the clash that's most important because how about we told you in first that there are many many urgent problems Thailand face in terms of environment. So if we can limit our output as much as possible, as quickly as possible, that actually gives us the best amount of impact. I think proposition also agrees. So let me look at who actually will be able to solve the problem quicker than first metric. Because we tell you that on our side of the house, the way that we are going to adapt our country to be able to be more like environmental friendly is to use things that already exist in the world. Is to just co-opt the technology that already exists in many of these countries. And we tell you that one is going to be quicker, but also two, it's also going to be some proven technology. This means that they have already been through like processes of scrutiny, processes of being used and refined for it to be a lot more efficient and a lot more like you can like install it a lot quicker. But also second metric then is just who actually gets the more impact then. Because we tell you that when you go and deep and go into the pool of global efforts, you can go into many more places. This looks like you can find one technology from one country, the other from any other countries. And when you have a pool of 197 to pick out, it's probably a lot more easy for you to find one that's best for every single industry you want to collaborate with. And just because of that, we can literally just choose and buy what we like. As opposed to in their world, we have to choose between the 10 ASEAN countries. But the problem here is that if there is something that's unique to Thailand that we need and like other ASEAN countries don't, then we have to find one for ourselves. And just because there are more countries in the world over ASEAN, it means that it's probably going to be a lot easier to find the best technology from wherever in the world there is. And then just the last piece of weighing then is that even if because on their side they have one big point just on how much more easy it's to negotiate with other ASEAN countries. We tell you that even if that is true and you can negotiate with ASEAN, I don't see what you actually get from other ASEAN countries. Because on their side of the house, Amy told you that you're going to be able to dictate other countries' policy. Well, I'm not sure how happy many of our neighbors would be if we try to dictate their policy and tell them how to run their own economy. ASEAN literally failed to do this for the past 20 years. But also secondly, we tell you, as Kaupan said, that many ASEAN countries make up a small amount of the global global carbon output anyways. So it means that it's probably going to be very limited in terms of the impact. So for all those reasons, opposition.
I thank the second oppositions for the speech. Next, I would like to invite the third propositions to conclude Prop's case. Here.
The problem that we see with side opposition's case right now is how they frame this debate, right? What I want to reaffirm on this debate again is that we are looking for regional cooperation that is more practical, more relevant, and also effective for our own bloc. Their point that to first clean things in this debate first, I want to make our point clear that we see the standings of our country and we see the standings of Thailand, even that we're in the ASEAN bloc right now, right? We see that these ASEAN countries are in poverty. There are so many people that can't actually step up to these like big issues from big countries with solving this UN Go Clean 2030 goals, right? What we see is actually for Thailand to be able to move forwards to those long-term goals that these developed countries are looking for, what we have to do is actually solve the problems and the environmental issues in our country and in our ASEAN bloc first before we can actually move to the global stage and solve those big problems of going clean or whatsoever. Right now, Thailand is facing floods, Thailand's facing all these monsoons issues, and we are not able to solve these issues to move forward. And especially because Thailand and ASEAN countries are very based on agricultural
work, right? So we see that the economy relies on these agricultural usages. That is why we have to care so much about collaborating with these ASEAN countries, because other developed countries, they're already focusing on technological advancements or whatsoever with that. So we see that the issue right now is that we have to solve our own environmental issues first before we can step up to the global issue of solving climate change. Okay, so three things that I would do in this debate is I will provide all the rebuttals, and then two clashes to present here is the effectiveness of whether ASEAN should join, whether we should join in the ASEAN bloc or not, and the feasibility of according to the political stability of our country. First of all, they're framing why doesn't it work, right? They're saying something about this change of supply chain. As I said before, these agricultural changes, these are our main majority part of being Thailand and ASEAN countries, or that we're a very agricultural-based market. So it's very hard for Thailand and ASEAN to change out of this circuit. So it's better to actually focus on our environmental efforts before trying to improve the going clean and reduce these carbon emissions. We have to be able to become the powerhouse of agriculture and improve our own environmental status before we can actually try to go clean. It is still reasonable for us to rely on fossil fuels right now, or to become sustained later in the long run, right? And their second point on this global effort and going with like countries like China, I think that's very untrue, because China and compare it to like first world country, right? Why I think this doesn't work is that these China is actually very comparable to those first world country, because their goal is to try to dominate developing countries, and they're trying to take over like ASEAN's countries like us and trying to reduce our bargaining power. So I think it's very unlikely for China to become and join in our bloc, and especially that China is being very competitive in the global eyes right now, like being very competitive with the US. I think it's very unlikely that they would join our bloc anyway, right? So second point of rebuttal here then, why joining ASEAN is bad, right? They say that there's this like poverty, oh wait, I already said that. I'm so sorry. Anyway, what they say about this bargaining power is that they think that Thailand has this big bargaining power that we can stand on the global stage without fearing other people. I think this is very untrue at the first place, right? Because those developed countries, they never actually care about Thailand. If you look in the status quo, right? Those countries try to focus and then frame this slippery slope of like we're going green, but how about these countries in poverty and like the technological usage that we have right now that other countries doesn't have? I think that is what Thailand has to focus right now, and this is why it's so important for us to focus on the ASEAN bloc right now. Okay, on to the clashes then. My first clash is on the effectiveness of all this like join ASEAN or not, right? So what we have presented you is that ASEAN issues are more important, because we tell you that these ASEAN issues are more tangible to us or more practical to us, and we already have a strong understanding of our own agricultural environmental issues, right? So what we have to do right now is actually strengthen our political influence and make a bloc that is stronger, so that we can stand stronger in a global effort. Yes.
Name one environmental issue that's only unique to ASEAN.
Relating to ASEAN, mostly, it's not only for ASEAN, but I think it's more like agricultural economy that we're focusing on right now, like rice farmings or whatsoever. And it's a really big issue for ASEAN, because we're focusing on this like agricultural, and we're trying to become this like powerhouse in food, market house, and soft power, or those all those things, right? So it's better to actually focus on these environmental issues and environmental efforts on the ASEAN bloc rather than go out and trying to be clean at the moment. What they have provided us right now is that, why collaborating with ASEAN is not good? Because they think that it's wasteful to work with these countries. I actually think that with this Thailand standing, we don't actually have that strong of a bargaining issue. And even if Thailand is able to use the fundings and have these bargaining powers, I don't think the technological advancement that they're looking for of being like trying to reduce this carbon emission are the same as us, because they're trying to go green, but what we're trying to actually solve is solve our own like environmental efforts actually. Anyways, on the second clash points then is visibility according to the political stability, right? What they have pushed upon us is that the political stability in our countries and ASEAN blocs are actually not that strong. So what we say is that the global efforts and the global political parties actually is not that strong as well. If you look at Trump, right, before in the Biden administration, they care so much about the environment. However, when Trump comes out, he doesn't care. He only wants to focus on how to make their economy better. So we see that those global efforts that the whole world is actually putting an eye on is very dependent on these developed countries. So if Thailand is trying to follow all these developed countries, what we're going down is that we're following these countries where sometimes they want to go green or sometimes they want to focus on ourselves. However, if we work in a bloc where we face the same issues of environmental issues like us, I think it's better to cooperate and become more practical and be more impactful in the long run for our country, the ASEAN countries to work with each other. Even if we have a different political alignment, we still face the same issues of the economy at this point, right? And what they say was that to like make all these new innovations that doesn't align. We think that these ASEAN countries are still growing as well, and if Thailand is able to become the leader on this on this block of ASEANs, it will be more effective to us in the long run as well. So, opposition. Thank you. I mean, proposition.
I thank the third prop for the speech. Next, I would like to invite the third oppositions to conclude today's debate. Here.
Lovely. There's one very small hurdle the government case just fails to go over. It's just how will Thailand actually lead ASEAN? How is it exactly that other countries in ASEAN is going to listen to us, is going to collaborate with us, and even if we can do that, they fail to answer on how the different countries in ASEAN do have the capacity to go along with us. And even then, even if we assume that we can effectively lead ASEAN and solve all ASEAN's issue, they also fail to mechanize to us that why is it that just ASEAN combining together means that the world will simply listen. Because Kopan already told you, ASEAN is just a very small corner of the world, it's just a very small union. There's not any reason that they will actually listen to us. The same way that we didn't even negotiate Trump's tariff as an ASEAN, the same way that we didn't even negotiate things like taxes of export taxes with China. We tell you that ASEAN does not operate like the way government wants it to do. But even then, let me just look at some of important things in the debate then. Because one, there's a very weird idea on side government that there is a climate issue that's unique to ASEAN. We tell you that the climate problem is a universal problem. Because most of the problem they tell us about agriculture failing, about things like flood, the main cause of it is just the output of carbon dioxide in the world. I think this is the same root cause that causes many of these problems. And when the problem is the same, and assuming the chemistry works the same everywhere in the world, and assuming that people do have to eat food everywhere in the world, we tell you that there's probably not a lot that's different, and we tell you that we do not have to only use ASEAN as a source of collaboration in order to make our farming more clean, in order to make our industry more clean. There's simply, like ASEAN is simply a part of the world, and because of the globalization that exists for hundreds of years in the past, we tell you that the world is already integrated enough. I don't think this differences do exist in the scale what they want to tell us. Before I move on, sure.
Why do you think Thailand has so much bargaining power in the global stage?
Why exactly do I need bargaining power to be able to sell goods to other countries? Why exactly do we need bargaining power in order to buy technology from them? It's very unclear why do we need more bargaining power that they say on their side of the world unless they want us to be able to lead movements. Panel, I don't even think we have the capacity to lead ASEAN. Why is it that the Cambodian leader would try to listen to us? Why is it that countries in ASEAN, especially in ASEAN, knowing our past of like colonialism, we probably probably don't want to be led and be told to do what to do in terms of economically by other countries, especially countries around us. So we tell you, it's probably very unlikely that we are going to be leading ASEAN, but even if that we have the incentive, I'll prove to you on why having ASEAN is a baggage to us in negotiating with other countries. So we tell you that even if we assume their best case on like terms of like being able to fix ASEAN, having ASEAN for us to go to the global stage is a baggage. Why? Because we have to carry regimes like Myanmar to go to negotiating with us. Why do you think that other countries like the US who cares about like human rights and stuff would want to negotiate with us when we have the baggage of Myanmar? Know that the leader of Myanmar still do have an ICC warrant for like the crimes that he committed in his own country, and we tell them if we start negotiating as ASEAN, we have Myanmar going with us. Imagine the American populace when you are told that your leader was basically negotiating with a group whose leader has an arrest warrant from the ICC for crimes against humanity. Simply, if the countries of the West are very care about Western and liberal ideas as much as they claim on their world, it means that the end goal that they were trying to reach simply is not going to be that possible. But even then, we tell you that ASEAN in itself is not as big enough as they claim it is. Because if you look at the scale of ASEAN's economy, it's not even half of what China's is. It's not even half of what the European Union is. It's not even like a quarter of what the USA is. So in that point, you're simply still a small country, just a little bit bigger. But we tell you that it's nothing, that means nothing if whatever the mechanism is true. Because for the same reason, that a country like for the same reason that a country like Japan on its own can get bullied by China, for the same reason that Bhutan, which is like basically nothing in terms compared to the US, doesn't have any power. If you do not reach a certain threshold, you simply get zero, and zero in our zero in their world simply makes no difference. So let's actually look at the actual problems in the debate then, as to like in Thailand, how we are going to solve environmental problem in our own country. Because what we need at Thailand is simply not to dictate the world and basically be a global leader, put a flag up and say, oh, this is what we want to do in terms of like environment. But we tell you that the output in carbon dioxide do have like effects even in our own country. We tell you the most proximate actor to all the output is our own self. So that means that the way that we win this debate then is to prove to you that how over time we are going to pollute the world less. For two reasons we already given to you. One, we tell you the mechanism on their world, even if it is true, takes a lot more time. Why? Because simply on their side of the house, they take a lot more steps. One, you have to finally be able to establish your power in ASEAN, wait for all like Myanmar or Cambodia to start like talking to you again. But the problem then is that even after all those time, which is a problem on their world, we know that ASEAN, as my first speaker framed to you, is probably so unstable. The person you befriended is probably gone out of power. There's probably a new guy you have to befriend. So that means that when we want to unite ASEAN as one bloc, it probably takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and at the end of the day, what do you even get? Because the impact will manifest in their world, not when you have ASEAN together, because they fairly fail to tell us on how ASEAN has the capacity to do anything in terms of environment. And we tell you another reason.
Last chance.
Sure.
Okay, so in your world, in one case, Thailand has to lead, Thailand has the capability, has the bargaining power to deal with the United States, but it cannot lead ASEAN. And in the other world, we don't need to lead ASEAN, we can collaborate and work together, be on par with other nations in ASEAN in order to develop a better environmental economy.
I already told you that I don't think you need any bargaining power to walk up to General Electric and tell them you want to buy the newest green tech. I already tell you that you do not need any any bargaining power to just go study at some university, or even go to the US and look at how New York does their flood walls. We tell you that I don't think bargaining power is that big as they claim it is in this debate then. But let me actually go back to what to what I was telling you. Because in our world, we already proved to you that we will basically be able to enact our plan faster. And we already told you in first that there is an urgency problem in the sense where we really need new green technology in our country to be able to move forward with our reform. We already proved to you in second and they didn't engage in golf whip that we are able to get better technology to be able to make like basically our economy greener. We already told you in second too that we tell second and first that there is a market for our green goods and we can probably just go trade with the European Union and like the West as a whole. So we tell you that we already give you a far clearer picture as to how we transform our country, not only economically but diplomatically to the way we want to stand with the rest of the world. We tell you that we can fix the problem faster and we have more impact. For all those reasons, vote opposition.
ขอบคุณน้องๆสำหรับการโต้วาทีที่เข้มข้นและเต็มไปด้วยพลังและความคิดสร้างสรรค์นะครับสิ่งที่เราได้ฟังไปเมื่อสักครู่เนี่ยเป็นมากกว่าคำตอบตายตัวว่าใครถูกใครผิดระหว่างฝ่ายเสนอกับฝ่ายค้านเป็นมากกว่าผลแพ้ชนะแต่ว่าเป็นการชวนให้เราตั้งคำถามนะครับติดต่อคิดต่อและมองปัญหาจากหลายมิติไม่ว่าจะเป็นเชิงสังคมเชิงหลักการสิ่งว่ารัฐบาลควรทำอะไรหรือในเชิงพาณิชย์หรือผลกระทบต่อไปครับสุดท้ายนี้หากทุกท่านอยากร่วมสนับสนุนน้องๆ Thailand National Debate Team หรือ TNT เพื่อให้มีโอกาสไปสร้างชื่อเสียงในเวทีโลกเรามีเสื้อทีมสุดรุ่นพิเศษนะครับอย่างที่เหมือนที่ผมใส่อยู่ในวันนี้รายได้ทั้งหมดเนี่ยเราจะนำไปสนับสนุนกิจกรรมและการซ้อมของน้องๆครับท่านสามารถเลือกซื้อได้ใน QR Code ที่ลิงก์ไปที่ Instagram Page ของเราหรือที่โต๊ะด้านข้างเวทีครับขอเสียงตบมือดังๆให้กับน้องๆอีกหนึ่งครั้งครับ
ทุกท่านครับปรบมือกับ Thailand National Debate Team ค่ะเดี๋ยวเชิญทั้งสองฝ่ายรวมถึงน้องทามแล้วก็ขอเชิญโค้ชพราวตาให้เกียรติถ่ายภาพร่วมกันบนเวทีกับหัวข้อท้ายสุดของงาน SX 2025 นะคะสำหรับเซสชั่นนี้มี QR Code ให้เหมือนเดิมค่ะรอสักครู่หนึ่งนะคะพี่โป้ไม่มาเมื่อวานแอบไปตัดผมนี่เองนะคะมาวันนี้ผมสั้นเลย พี่โอ๊ตคิดถึงใช่ถามหาลูกชายทุกวันเลยนี่คือว่าที่นักโต้เวทีทีมชาติไทยปรบมือกับทุกท่านบนเวทีอีกครั้งหนึ่งนะคะให้กำลังใจค่ะสำหรับน้องๆทุกท่านเลยน้องๆทุ่มเทไม่ว่าจะเป็นเรื่องของการตั้งใจเรียนแล้วเรื่องของการโต้วาทีน้องๆไม่เคยทิ้งแล้วก็ฝึกซ้อมฝึกฝนตลอดเวลาและทุกวันด้วยนะคะเดี๋ยวขออนุญาตให้น้องชามกับโค้ชพราวตาอยู่กับพี่โอ๊ตก่อนเพราะว่าอยากจะให้ฝากแมสเซจอะไรถึงผู้ใหญ่ใจดีวันนี้นะคะเมื่อสักครู่น้องทามบอกไปแล้วเนอะว่าสำหรับ Thailand National Debate Team ของเราไม่ได้มีสปอนเซอร์ในการเข้ามาสนับสนุนตลอดการแข่งขันไม่ว่าจะเป็นแข่งขันทัวร์นาเมนต์ไหนก็แล้วแต่ที่ผ่านมาคือทุนเราเองหนึ่งแล้วก็มีการเรสฟันโดยการนี่ค่ะจากทุกท่านก็คือเสื้อน้องทามหันหลังให้หน่อย
ได้ครับ
เสื้อที่น้องทามใส่อยู่คือสีขาวอันนี้ที่พี่โอ๊ตถืออยู่จะเป็นสีดำนะคะก็จะมีปีนี้ปี 2025 ก็จะมีโลโก้น่ารักแบบนี้นะคะมี2สีแบบนี้ด้วยก็ถ้าใครอยากจะช่วยซัพพอร์ตน้องๆแล้วก็ทีมของเราสามารถซื้อได้เลยหรือว่าสแกน QR Code เมื่อสักครู่นะคะเพื่อติดตามในช่องทางของ Thailand National Debate Team กันแต่วันนี้โค้ชพราวตามมานะคะมาอยู่กับพวกเราด้วยและวันนี้เป็นหัวข้อท้ายสุดสำหรับในการนำเสนอโต้วาทีภาษาอังกฤษให้กับทุกท่านได้รับชมกันซึ่งโอ๊ตเชื่อค่ะว่าทุกท่านไม่เคยรู้จักทีมนี้มาก่อนรวมถึงพวกเราด้วยนะคะวันนี้เรารู้จักพวกเขาแล้วเป็นเยาวชนทีมชาติไทยที่ต้องแข่งขันกันวันนี้อยากให้โค้ชอยากจะบอกอะไรสำหรับทุกท่านวันนี้รวมถึงผู้ชมที่รับชมผ่านทาง SX Application ที่ YouTube ด้วยค่ะ
ก็อยากบอกว่าน้องๆฝึกกันหนักจริงๆนะคะแล้วก็หลายๆท่านที่ทุกปีเราจะพาน้องไปแค่5คนแต่เบื้องหลังของ5คนที่ติดทีมชาติแล้วเนี่ยก็จะมีน้องๆที่ฝึกฝนกันหนักและนานส่วนมากกว่าจะติดทีมชาติได้เนี่ยค่ะก็ฝึกฝนอยู่กับเราประมาณ ถ้าตีเป็นเวลาก็ประมาณปีหรือ2ปีอย่างน้อย โดยที่กว่าจะมาติดพูลได้เขาต้องฝึกมาก่อนหน้านั้นอีกเป็นหลายๆปีหลายๆคนก็ตั้งใจมากๆนะคะแล้วก็จริงๆต้องขอบคุณทาง SX Sustainability Expo จริงๆแล้วก็ผู้ใหญ่ทุกคนที่ให้โอกาสน้องๆมาแสดงศักยภาพที่นี่เพราะว่าบางทีเนี่ยมันก็เป็นกิจกรรมที่ค่อนข้างที่จะเข้าถึงยากแล้วก็เราไม่ได้ทำ PR เยอะขนาดนั้นเป็นภาษาอังกฤษด้วยอะไรด้วยบางทีเราก็ไม่ได้มีเวทีให้น้องๆเยอะมากที่น้องๆจะได้แสดงศักยภาพของเขาจริงๆนะคะก็ต้องขอบคุณทั้งสปอนเซอร์ด้วยที่ให้โอกาสน้องๆแล้วชวนพวกเรามาค่ะ
ค่ะเมื่อสักครู่โค้ชแพรวตาบอกว่าทีมชาตินะคะนี่ค่ะหน้าตาอดีตแล้วก็ตอนนี้เทิร์นตัวเองเป็นผู้จัดการทีมนะคะแล้วก็โค้ชให้กับน้องๆด้วยอยากจะฝากอะไรสำหรับทุกท่านที่รับชมแล้วก็ได้เห็นศักยภาพของทีมเราวันนี้น้องทามเป็นหนึ่งในเยาวชนไทยที่แข่งขันต่างประเทศมาก่อนแล้วก็วันนี้นะคะเรามีหัวข้อทั้งหมดเนี่ยจริงๆแล้ว10 วันของเรามีแค่6หัวข้อเนาะแล้วก็น้องๆบอกว่าหัวข้อนี้ยากที่สุดแล้วก็มันมีคอนฟ lict ในเรื่องของนี้ด้วยเพราะมันสามารถตีความไปได้ในหลายมิติกันน้องทามอยากให้ฝากสำหรับทุกท่านที่รับชมในเรื่องของ Thailand National Debate Team รวมถึงฝากถึงน้องๆที่แข่งขันเพราะว่าเดือนหน้าเขาจะแข่งขันกันที่โรงเรียนเตรียมอุดมด้วยนะคะเชิญค่ะ
ก็ในเชิงของเรื่องฝากก่อนแล้วกันนะครับว่า Thailand National Debate Team หรือดีเบตองค์การดีเบตทั้งหมดแล้วกันนะครับเราจะชอบรู้สึกว่ามันใกล้ตัวมากถ้าคุณได้เข้ามาแต่ว่าสำหรับคนด้านนอกที่ไม่เคยเข้ามาจะรู้สึกว่าแบบดีเบตมันก็คือการเมืองเราต้องไปเรียนรัฐศาสตร์หรือเปล่าแต่ผมคือคนหนึ่งที่แบบต่อต้านความคิดนั้นมากๆเพราะว่าผมก็คือจบวิทยาศาสตร์คอมพิวเตอร์แล้ววิชาโทเป็นทัศนศิลป์ก็คือไม่เกี่ยวอะไรกับสิ่งที่คนส่วนใหญ่จะคิดว่าดีเบตมันต้องเกี่ยวใช่ไหมครับผมรู้สึกว่าสกิลที่เราได้จากดีเบตเนี่ยไม่ว่าจะเป็นเนื้อหาก็ตามหรือว่าสกิลการพูดบนเวทีทั้งหมดเนี่ยมันเป็นสกิลที่เราไปต่อยอดได้ง่ายมากๆไม่ว่าเราจะทำงานตำแหน่งไหนบริษัทอะไรและเนื้องานอะไรนะครับเพราะฉะนั้นแล้วก็อยากฝากว่าหลายๆครั้งเราอาจจะ PR ไม่ดีพอเราอาจจะผิดเองว่าหลายๆครั้งเรามาตรงนี้เพื่อแบบให้มี visibility แล้วก็อยากให้ทุกคนได้อยู่ดูเพื่อแล้วก็มีการแข่งขันอะไรเราก็จะพยายามโปรโมทให้ดีขึ้นติดตามใน IG ได้ตอนกลางเดือนนี้นะครับมีการแข่งที่เตรียมอุดมถ้าใครอยากรู้จักดีเบตมากขึ้นก็ติดต่อมาทางเพจของ Thailand National Debate Team ได้เลย Facebook จะชื่อ WSDC Thailand นะครับก็จะได้มาดูดีเบตจริงๆได้เห็นน้องๆได้รู้ว่าคอมมูนิตี้นี้เป็นอะไรหรือว่าใครที่ลูกหลานสนใจก็จะได้ติดต่อได้ครับ
หรือแม้กระทั่งสถานศึกษาโรงเรียนรัฐนานาชาติเอกชนต่างๆที่มีความสนใจนะคะเรียกว่าโค้ชแพรวตากับน้องทามเนี่ยยินดีที่จะเข้าไปนำเสนอสิ่งที่ทำให้สามารถเพิ่มศักยภาพของน้องๆได้แน่นอนเพราะต่อยอดได้
ใช่ค่ะแล้วก็เป็นส่วนหนึ่งของการหา funding ของเราเหมือนกันทุกปีเราก็จะมีค่ายนะคะ Thailand National Debateทีมแคมป์ที่เราจะปลูกพื้นฐานให้เด็กๆเลยเป็น Open Enrollment ใครที่ว่างแล้วสามารถแล้วสนใจเข้ามานะคะก็สามารถเข้ามาได้เลยใครที่อาจจะมีลูกหลานหรือว่าเป็นสถานศึกษาหรืออะไรที่ยังไม่มั่นใจว่าสนใจหรือเปล่านะคะเดี๋ยวเราก็จะมีค่ายหรือมีกิจกรรมเรื่อยๆที่พยายามโปรโมทให้น้องๆเข้ามารู้จักดีเบตมากขึ้นนะคะ
วันนี้นะคะเราต้องการทุกท่านในการช่วยกันเป็นผู้สนับสนุนเนาะรวมถึงสปอนเซอร์ด้วยแต่ทั้งนั้นเนี่ยเขาก็มีกิจกรรมต่างๆให้คุณสามารถติดตามแล้วก็ follow ได้วันนี้ขอบคุณโค้ชแพรวตากับคุณทามปรบมือกับ Thailand National Debate Team ค่ะขอบคุณค่ะเป็นกำลังใจให้ทุกๆท่านเลยสำหรับนะคะน้องๆทุกๆระดับอายุแล้วก็ชั้นด้วยนะคะกับทุกๆสเตจในการแข่งขันกันเขาบอกว่าปีหน้าเขาจะไปเคนยากันนะคะสำหรับใครที่สนใจเรื่องของเสื้อในการช่วยกันซัพพอร์ตวันนี้ยินดีมากๆในการจำหน่ายวันนี้เลยที่นี่เลยก็ได้รวมไปถึงติดตามใน Instagram กับ Thailand National Debate Team นะคะหรือท่านสนใจท่านเป็นผู้หนึ่งที่จะเป็นผู้นำองค์กรนะคะหรือว่าจะเป็นสถานศึกษาต่างๆวันนี้ก็สามารถติดต่อได้สำหรับน้องทามกับโค้ชแพรวตาในการฟันดิ้งด้วยนะคะ